What's up, guys? Welcome back to Let's Play Fate Extella. We are finishing up Gilgamesh's side story today. So, that means we're almost done with the side stories before we can move on with the fourth and final main story campaign. So, interesting dialogue here between Arturia and Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh does not know who Archimedes is until Arturia explains it to him. He's like, you know, it's just another filthy mongrel. It's not anyone who I care to recognize. And so he's like, anyone who cared to remember his name would suppose he left his mark on history. But he also determines that Archimedes is kind of up to no good. He has Archimedes figured out right from the beginning, and I think that's fascinating because, as we saw in Arturia's campaign, when Gilgamesh just shows up and steals the show, he knew that Archimedes was going to try to turn on her and attack her. So he was basically like, I don't think this is a good idea. I think I may lose my precious asset, Arturia, if I just stand idly by and allow this to happen. So Gilgamesh is very smart in that regard, very perceptive. So unfortunately, the Faker doesn't know when to quit, so we're going to have to put him down one more time. Yes, we're going to have to fight Archer again, so as much as it pains me to do so. It's okay, Archer had his time in the spotlight, and he'll get some more screen time in the final campaign. But anyway, so this mission is... One thing I realized about the side stories is that they are based off of the main story missions from the servant that controls that respective team. Oh, hell. Speaking of which... the more the merrier. If you wish to meet your demise today, I will have no choice but to oblige. So Nero just bamps right in and decides she wants to hand us our ass with her regalia, which is kind of annoying. So already having to deal with Archer, who is not particularly strong right now, we can actually deal some pretty good damage to him, but Nero with her regalia is a super-powered servant, so unfortunately we can't really deal with her all that effectively. So this mission is from Arturia's campaign. It is where we have a time limit to capture the regime matrix and just complete the level. We're not actually required to defeat any of these other servants, so we're going to have to find a way to get rid of Nero. Even if we can't permanently deal with her, we're just going to have to capture all these high-value sectors, which probably means martyring off our low-value sectors so that we can stall for time, and we can essentially take over the high-value ones and complete the regime matrix, which is going to be difficult, and the amount of damage that Nero does to us. Finally, a weapon that Gilgamesh does not have in his treasure trove, the regalia. So we're going to go over here really quick and wait for Nero to transfer sectors. Every time she does the Blitzkrieg right there, she's going to invade another sector. So that means we can go back into the sector that's worth 3 points and capture that. Okay, she's here. Let's go ahead and get out, and we'll go ahead and capture that sector again. So that's kind of what our goal is there. So we need to take out Emiya, which should be pretty easy. He's almost on his last legs there. He's almost dead. Okay, now we can go ahead and finish capturing this sector. So anyway, what I really like the fact that these missions for the side stories are based off of the main campaign for that particular servant team. So for instance, when we played as Archer and Ku, we had Nero's campaign missions to choose from. And now that we're playing as Gilgamesh, we have Arturia's campaign stories to choose from. If we were playing as Medusa or Lubu or Karna, we would have Tamamo's. Now, Arturia's side story, Archimedes' side story, and Elizabeth's side story, from what I understand, are 100% unique, where they have missions that are not really derived from the three main campaigns. Archimedes has missions that are derived from the fourth and final campaign, and Arturia's has her own missions, which is essentially just a boss gauntlet, which is, like we showed off in that episode, kind of unfortunate because I really would like to see what she's like fighting against regular units instead of just bosses, because she feels a little bit weird to control when you're not used to fighting against regular enemies and you go straight up against a boss with her. but it works out pretty well overall. And you can always just go into free battle and select a random opponent. I actually got a viewer request to see Arturia against Nero, so I may do that eventually if you guys really want to see that. So we have these very powerful aggressors here. Because this side story takes place in a campaign later on in the game, we're going to be fighting tougher enemies and things like that. And Gilgamesh is more than up to the challenge. I really like that aerial attack he does there, where he slashes with that sword and then follows up with some more gate attacks there. It's very effective against these types of aggressors, because as I demonstrated with Archer's side story, these guys can be pretty difficult, and having good aerial attacks is a good way to counter them, because they're pretty much impossible to hit on the ground. So Jean is holding this point right here, which is pretty good. We'll keep her where she stays. She can pretend like she's... oh, somebody made this joke the other day. I was talking to my friends who were doing the Type Moon panel with me at MomoCon, and we were talking about Extella, and he was complaining that he thinks Extella is hard when it really isn't, actually. He thought it was harder than most Musou games, and unless you're playing it on the hardest difficulty, I really fail to see why that's the case. I just think he kind of needs to get good, frankly. But he was saying how the game will punish you for not getting to the objective, which is absolutely true. You can't just derp around and kill random mobs forever. You actually have to get to the objective eventually, which I feel like that's the case with every Musou game. I really don't understand why you would just be killing enemies over and over and over and over and over again on the same sector, even in like Basra, which really doesn't punish you for, like, at least in Basra there's no losing condition other than dying. But most of these Musou games have, you know, a map control gameplay mechanic where you have to, you know, control the entire map in order to win the match, and if you lose a significant portion of it, you'll lose the match. And Extella is no exception in that regard. But basically, he made the joke, he's like, oh, Overwatch players need to play Extella so they can learn to get to the objective, and I thought that was pretty funny. Seeing Jean and Iskander back there just kind of holding the points, it kind of reminded me of that. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and go all out against Nero and all of these aggressors here and hopefully destroy this plant in the process. So not only are we taking this high-value sector, but we're cutting Nero down to size as well. So we went all out and used our Moon Drive, and we used... we had a new gate attack that used the chains. Now the chains, if I hadn't mentioned before, are the chains are designed to bind things with divinity. So they bind divine servants and divine beasts. They were meant to restrain even the gods themselves, as Gilgamesh once said. I'm going to try to lure Nero into this sector. Is this the sector where Iskander is? I don't think so. Yeah, there he is. Okay, so yeah, she'll go over here and fight Iskander, which means we may have to martyr him off. But they will have an excellent duel to the death. We'll actually get to fight Iskander as Nero in an epic decisive battle coming up in the 4th and final campaign. But again, this sector is only worth 1 point right now. So if Iskander can stall for long enough while we go back here and capture this one worth 3 points, then we'll be in pretty good shape. It's almost captured too. We just got to get rid of one more aggressor. So again, because we leveled up since the last video, we've unlocked some more secondary abilities for Gilgamesh, including that one, which is pretty awesome. So I think if you hit square 4 times and then triangle, or maybe it's just if you hit square 5 times, if you don't go into anything else, he has a follow-up slash attack with the scythe and the axe and everything, and it looks pretty awesome. So Gilgamesh does eventually get a lot of really nice abilities, and hopefully I'll be able to demonstrate enough of them on screen. But there's not that much left for his side story, really, so... That was fast. We really took over that sector quickly. Okay, so now we actually have the double tap. If you double tap triangle, we can use the gate in 2 different directions, which I think is awesome. I tend to abuse that a lot. There's that drill attacking there again, which I think is pretty cool. Oh, we still have to destroy one more aggressor before we fully capture this map. Yeah, so that's a really nice move for Gil there, where he just keeps slashing like that. I'm trying to show off a variety of his different moves. Make sure that this is the least repetitive gameplay you guys can possibly watch. And so far I feel like I've been pretty successful about that. Alright, with 5 minutes left, we complete the regime matrix. Okay, time to go take on Gawain, who is the unfortunate servant who's going to have to meet his demise today at the hands of Gilgamesh. Okay, so Gawain, if we hadn't said so before, is one of the Knights of the Round Table, and is one of the strongest servant, or Saber-class servants in Type Moon, really. So, he's quite powerful. He gets his power from the sun, and the sword he wields is referred to as Gallatin. So, seeing that in its full power is actually pretty nice. But unfortunately, he's no match for the King of Heroes. So part of that discussion we were having yesterday was also talking about, we've mentioned Gilgamesh a few times in there, so we were saying how, Gilgamesh as a servant is actually pretty problematic because he doesn't listen to you. So he would essentially, he has such a disinterest, at least in the context of Fate Zero, had such a disinterest in the Grail War itself that he would often refuse to fight just based on his own principles, and that would be very detrimental to the Master's safety. He would honestly sooner let his Master die, leave the material world, than to actually bother with actually fighting, which is pretty aggravating. The only reason why he fought for the Grail in Zero was because it exists, therefore it is mine, which means that they should not even attempt to take it from me. It wasn't, oh, that's a treasure so I need it, it's, it exists, therefore it is already mine, and anybody who wants to take my treasure is wrong. So we're going to unleash Aya on Gawain, which is obviously going to devastate him. He was already pretty low on health, but I can't not show this on screen, obviously. It's just too cool not to show it off. And of course he laughs maniacally at us. And Gawain survived! Good job, Gawain. We're just going to finish you off now. Okay, that was another part of the discussion, as I had, my friend was bitching about how the Noble Phantasms are used in Extella, and I'm not really, again, I don't think it makes sense from a lore perspective, because obviously you don't pick up keys to be able to use your Noble Phantasm, that's not how that works, but I think it's done for balancing, to where they made it to where you can only use your Noble Phantasm once per stage, and if you use it during the final battle, when you transfer to Nero or Tamamo's arena, then that's different. That doesn't count. So, really, I feel like I don't like the way that they were complaining about it, because if it was a gauge that filled up similar to the other, you already have 2 gauges that fill up as it is, so that's a little excessive. And then, if you were to have another gauge on top of that, not only would that be really excessive, but it would also, you could potentially use it more than once in the same stage. That's not balanced. Most Noble Phantasms, even in the context of Fate Zero, the servant only can really get away with using them once, and then they have to recharge. And I feel like that would still be the same even for Extella, even though we've established that the servants have a lot more capacity for mana, they have a lot more power. They're not held down by the restraints of their masters, and I think it's because the Moon Cell provides them with power. But I really don't understand the contention of the arguments he was making regarding Extella. He's definitely a Grand Order apologist, and I take issue with that, because Grand Order is, as much as, and I'll come back to this, but Grand Order is not a real game. The fact that I can hold Extella in my hand and say that I own it, and the fact that I can finish these 4 main story campaigns and say that I finished it, means that it's a real game. The fact that I can never own Grand Order and never finish Grand Order means it's not a real game to me. So, get good, essentially. And aside from, but the good thing about Grand Order is I cannot disrespect the good things that it's done for Type Moon and the Fate fandom, because the fact that Grand Order has given us so much popularity and money surrounding Type Moon that has created all of the great works we're going to get this year, between the Extra Last Encore, the Heaven's Feel movie, the Prisma Ilium movie, the Apocrypha anime, the Grand Order OVA that we got, Fate of the Furious, no, that's a joke, and but you get what I'm saying. Like, Grand Order has allowed those things to be possible through the success of it. So the fact that Type Moon has got so much money off of those awful microtransactions means that we can have these other awesome works. So credit where it's due. Grand Order has done a lot of great things and been very influential for the Type Moon fandom. But on the downside, it's still a free-to-play mobile phone game with microtransactions, and that in and of itself is unforgivable. And I don't care that we're getting the English version, it's still a free-to-play mobile phone game with microtransactions. I am not interested. I'm definitely going to give it a shot, because the argument I made about Extella is like, it exists, and if you have access to it, there is absolutely no reason why you should not give Extella a try. Even if you're not a fan of Muso games, there's no reason why you should not give Extella a try if you are a Fate fan. But that same argument applies to Grand Order. Like, even if you're not a fan of free-to-play mobile phone games with microtransactions, there's no reason why I shouldn't give Grand Order a try. So I'm going to give it a try when the English version comes out this summer, but it doesn't... Grand Order doesn't pander to me as much because, again, I have a ton of games in my backlog. I have a lot of things I need to finish. A lot of things I need to finish for the sake of getting ready for a Let's Play. I don't have the time to put into Grand Order, and you could not convince me to pay real-world money for the microtransactions in Grand Order. As soon as I felt like it was necessary, I'd put the game down. Not on principle, just out of boredom, essentially, because I would not pay real-world money for that game. But it panders so much to the type of, you know, nerds that are in the community. They want to collect all the waifus, and who can blame them, you know? There's a lot of really high-quality, like, fan service, fan art that has come out of Grand Order, and they have a lot of really great character designs. Who wouldn't want to collect all the waifus? But it's essentially the same thing as like the Fire Emblem mobile phone game, where it's like, we'll put all the cute characters in there and give them fan art of their armor and clothing being torn for the sake of fan service, and then people want to spend money to collect all the waifus. It's pandering at its finest, and not that I'm shaming anyone for being into that, because by all means, if that's what you're into, go for it. I'm not going to shame anybody for wanting a little bit of harmless relief from... or harmless relief through expression with things like that, and Japan is very good about that, about having, you know, hentai, fan art, things like that of that nature that, you know, are good for, you know, romantic or sexual expression, things like that. So again, I'm not going to shame anybody for wanting to collect all the waifus, and even I, you know, shamelessly enough, really like some of the designs that have come out of Grand Order, but it's not enough to make me pay money for it. Like, I'm just not that kind of... I'm not that kind of fan, but these particular games cater so much to those types of fans. Honestly, I would rather pay for the alternate costumes in Extella that are for fan service than for gacha in Grand Order. That's just how I feel about it. But anyway, hopefully, fingers crossed that this does not become a big point of contention during the panel at MomoCon. If anybody is going to MomoCon, please make sure to stop by and check out the Type Moon Universe fan panel. It's at 7 o'clock on Friday night. I will be hosting with 4 other guys, and we will be talking about... We'll have a brief synopsis of what Type Moon is and the works that they've made up until now. And then we'll talk about the present, where I'll talk about the Grand Order OVA and Extella, and I'll gush about Extella for as minimal time as I'm allowed, and or as much time as I'm allowed to without destroying the runtime of the panel. And then we'll go on to talk about the future. So we'll talk about the announcements coming out, like the Apocrypha anime and all the other stuff I just mentioned, and then we'll take questions from the audience, and we'll actually have a giveaway. And I really want to see if I can get another copy of the Noble Phantasm edition of Extella. So if you guys are interested in winning a copy of Extella, if you're interested in winning a copy of the Noble Phantasm edition of Extella for the PS4, please make sure to stop by the Type Moon Universe fan panel at MomoCon, and make sure you submit some good fan questions for us on the panel. We may pick you for the prize. Okay, so now that ridiculous rant is over, we're moving on to... I'm going to talk about this current level that we're in. So, we have a time limit for this level as well, and again, all we have to do is capture the regime matrix. So, I'm trying to find the last aggressor right now. He's gone AWOL. I'm trying to finish this sector, but the arrow is pointing me to the aggressor, and I can't seem to find him. The fact that I really haven't talked about that enough. So the fact that that arrow is there is really helpful, because it's essentially, you know, the crazy taxi arrow. It tells you where to go. And it tells you that, you know, even though I was playing the Japanese version with no real knowledge of what I was doing in this game. I still know exactly what to do as far as that goes because the arrow would tell you. So, you know, there doesn't need to be an overly intrusive tutorial or a text box that appears or some exposition by another character. Simple visual cues are good. Is good game design when it comes to trying to tell the gamer or the player what they need to do. So I really do appreciate that. I think that's a really great feature, especially because, again, like my friend said, you gotta get to the objective. So that was the last stage of Altera's campaign, and this would be where Altera would fight Nero, just like we are right now. So we're gonna go up against Nero, and we have to defeat her again. And she already starts out in her Regalia form, which is interesting to say the least. Again, I take issue with this from a story standpoint because really Gilgamesh would not be the one doing this. It makes much more sense in Altera's campaign the way things actually happened, where Altera was fighting on the front lines, and Gilgamesh just sort of shows up whenever he feels like it. That's much more in character for all of these respective characters. So I'm going to use my Moon Drive on Nero, and I'm going to save my Noble Phantasm for later, actually. So, again, in this fight, in Altera's campaign, it was Altera fighting Nero, and then Gilgamesh just shows up at the last minute when Archimedes gets in her way, which I think makes much more sense from a story perspective. Anyway, so Nero is pretty difficult here, but nothing that Gilgamesh can't handle. She changed forms already back into her Regalia form, but unfortunately that was not enough. The gate does an obscene amount of damage to her, even in her Regalia form, so that was pretty easy to take her out. What's this? The other Saberface wants to take us on, so Arturia is here to end our reign of villainy once and for all, but fortunately we still have another Moon Drive saved up from our Codecast. We're going to take her on. So how Gilgamesh and Arturia's banter ties in the story is basically, you know, Gilgamesh essentially puts her down and says, "You're not a real king," during the Three Kings banquet scene in Fate Zero, and then when she has her ultimate underdog moment, like we saw, where she uses Excalibur on Castor's Cthulhu monstrosity, this moment is so endearing to Gilgamesh because he's like, she's so beautiful yet so miserable because she carries all the burden of her peers on her shoulders. He's like, he has a fascinating obsession with her misery, and he's like, I need to marry that. So this obsession continues into Fate's Day Night, where he purposefully does not use Ea at its full power. He uses it basically just to show off. So because he does not want to kill her, he wants her to marry him. And that's why Saber was actually able to defeat him in a one-on-one fight once she had Avalon, was because he did not want to kill her. He was actually fighting a fair one-on-one duel instead of going all out, which ended up finally being Gilgamesh's demise, thankfully enough. How disappointing indeed. Again, I really don't like how Arturia is used in the side stories. I feel like I liked how she was used in her own side story, I guess, where she disrupts Gilgamesh and Iskander and gets her ultimate revenge on that Three Kings banquet scene. But other than that, I don't like her being defeated by Gilgamesh. It's really insulting, but I suppose that's just the route that Gilgamesh takes for this story. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you guys next time with the final side story that I plan to do before finishing this Let's Play.
他のトップサーバントどもと同じく残念だったな。貴様が優勢のかけらを切り払うことはない。アルテラとの決着は貴様の命運は今ここに決する。待たせたな。いえ、この程度の傷で戦いはここからです。英雄をすべてを知りながら勝ち切って。
はは。
今どうやら二人目がやってきたらしい。アルテラは物理的な破壊だったが、月の裏側にいた影響がここで出るとはな。俺は貴様らより幾分早く。悪性情報。それは月の裏側に放棄された人間の悪そのものと聞きましたが。
The Curse of the Grail. Interesting.
許すがよい騎士よ。先にやるべきことができた。だが心しろよ。次に出会う時は俺とてどうなっているかわからん。さて、現れたのは復讐の女神の原点か、あるいはその殻をかぶったものか、どちらでもよい。ベルバーの真実、一足先に見せてもらおうではないか。